It's time for a Dirt Daily, and today I'm working on the bottom side of my Jeep JL I call NewbSock. You may be asking, bottom side of the Jeep, that's probably what? Suspension, drivetrain? Nope, I'm talking skid plates. The bottom of your Jeep is basically where all of the inner organs of the thing live. The engine oil pan, the transmission pan, the transfer case, and you want to protect that. Now, Jeeps come with skid plates, but they're usually pretty light duty stuff. They hold up for a little bit, but if you're going to make off-roading your full-time hobby, or at least your almost every weekend hobby, as I'm assuming you are, you're probably going to want more than sheet metal protecting those parts. I just put a brand new engine and transmission and transfer case in this thing. I don't want to punch a hole in the pan the first time I take it off-road. So this is what I'm using. These are from Metalcloak. It's a 3-piece component skid plate system. This front plate goes underneath the engine and starts under the transmission. Then there's a plate that goes underneath the transmission transfer case. And then there's a long piece down the side that protects the fuel tank. Another very important part to protect, because punch a hole in your fuel tank, you're going to be walking. These are made of formed and welded 1/4-inch steel, and then they have brackets that run up to the chassis in different places. But it's really a pretty simple kit, and they're gold. It's not real gold, it's like a zinc chromate, some sort of coating that protects it, keeps it from rusting. It's basically like a grade 8 bolt. So first step is I'm going to put the part that goes underneath the transfer case up on the transmission jack and jack it up on there so we can start lining it up with the mounting holes. Why did I go with steel instead of aluminum? Well, honestly, the steel components are like half the price of aluminum skid plates. So, and steel's pretty strong. You can smash it into stuff and it usually bounces back. So let's throw this thing up on that transmission jack. If you don't have a transmission jack, or if you're not working on a lift, you can use a floor jack or call the neighbor and find a kid who's like going out for the football team and needs to get some reps in. You may recall when I pulled the engine and transmission and transfer case out, I removed a bunch of skid plates here, basically like a tubular structure and a cross member. It wasn't very substantial, but by pulling all that stuff out, it actually helped me because I'm one step closer to installing the new skid plate. I put the middle section on the transmission jack and jacked it up here. I used a factory bolt in this corner. I put some new hardware across these bolt holes to locate everything, and then there's another bolt back here that goes up underneath the gas tank. And I did this because I want to drill a hole right here. I have to put a nutsert in. A nutsert is like this kind of expansion fitting that you drop into a piece of metal and then you tighten it and it expands and it gives you a threaded hole that you can put in various places. A lot of people use them on rock sliders when they're attaching them to the side of a tub. This calls for one installed right in the frame. So what I have to do next is punch a hole so that I can drill and put that nutsert in right here. I don't have a transfer punch, which is a punch of various sizes that fits in that hole perfectly, but I do have a drill bit that is pretty close. So what I'm going to do is I put this big old drill bit on here, and I'm going to line it up in that hole, and then I'm going to drill, and that gives me a nice center line, and then I'll come back in with a step bit or a smaller drill bit, drill that hole, and slowly step it up. We're trying to get to 11/16. So now that that's marked, I can actually drop the skid plate out of the way and drill that and install the nutsert. When drilling a hole in the frame like that, the best method is to step up your drill bit sizes. This needs to have an 11/16 hole in it. We're going to start with like a 1/4 inch and then step up to like 3/8, slowly work our way up to 11/16. Also, you're drilling right above you. There's going to be lots of hot little shards and little needles of metal dripping down on you. So you might want to wear gloves. If not, that's cool. Be whatever you want to be, but I like to wear gloves when I'm drilling above my head. Another drilling option is something like this, which is called a step bit, and it allows you to step up all the way to the hole that you want. Now the 11/16 hole is about halfway through this step bit. So what I like to do is grab a marker and mark exactly where that hole is so that you know not to go past that. Drilling that hole, I have that step bit marked. The other thing is a lot of drills have a high and a low range. When it's in the low range, it applies more torque, which is better for larger holes. You can actually hear the drill going slower. And that's it. We got to that black step, which is the 11/16, and now we can get the nutsert and install it in the hole. The final step on this riv nut assembly is to install the riv nut into the hole and then use the tool to expand that riv nut. So this will go up in there and then pull down in and expand and basically give you a threaded hole right there. Now, what I like to see is right here above that hole, not too far back from it, there's almost a 2-inch hole in the side of the frame. So if this goes completely sideways, you could get a nut down in there, maybe a flange nut, hold it with a wrench kind of at an angle, and you would have a way to have a nut on the top side inside of the frame. It wouldn't be a hole that is attached to the frame, so it'd be a little wonky if you ever had to take it back out, but there is a backup solution if your riv nut has a failure. That goes up in there. That looks pretty good. We have a riv nut installed in the frame. So what exactly is a riv nut install tool? It's a nut with the threads drilled out from the inside. I like to add a washer so that you can have the bolt that pulls the riv nut and down and expands it. And then this nut doesn't thread on, it just slides on. Put a wrench on that nut so it doesn't spin and it holds the riv nut in place, and then tighten this up and it'll pull that riv nut down and make it expand. Pretty stoked on that. Feels like a good install, nice and tight. Let's put a skid plate on. Next, I'm installing the skid plate and bolting it up in. The kit has some really neat fasteners. It's just a basic Allen bolt, but then it uses a beveled washer so that when it's up in there, this washer kind of protects the head of the bolt and allows rocks and obstacles to kind of slide over. Also remember, right here where we put that riv nut in, that's a standard thread where most of the other holes in the chassis are going to be a metric thread. So if there's one standard bolt with your kit, double check, it probably goes right there. Otherwise you'll cross thread it like crazy. Skid plates are going well. Actually not. I ran into a little speed bump. The skid plate has 3 holes across, or 4 holes across the bottom that attach to a cross member. And then there's 2 holes up here in the front that go up to some arms that go up to the motor mounts. This hole here goes to the frame, and it happened to go to the frame in the exact spot where the arms of my lift were underneath the Jeep. And this lift is a great lift, but it's huge, which is good if you're lifting a motorhome, but for 2-door Jeeps, the arms always seem to either be too long or not in the right area. So I had to bring the Jeep down and put the Jeep on jack stands in order to hold it up so I can get the arm away from the frame, so I can get the skid plate up in there and put that 1 bolt in that goes into the frame on that side. So now I'm going to crawl underneath there, roll around the ground a bunch, and try to get this to hook, to be in the right position. My neighbor's kid doesn't play football, so he's not going to come over and help me. So I'm probably going to use a floor jack and just crawl around on the ground until I get 4 bolts started, and then I can raise it back up and keep moving. Oh, I might have to actually do the same thing on the back, because I think the arm for the rear side also gets in the way of where the gas tank skid plate goes. So I'm probably going to crawl under there and get all the bolts lined up, and then I'll raise it back up and I'll show you where everything goes. Oh, come on, you big heavy thing. The last 2 pieces of the skid plate are coming together pretty pretty good. I'm having to use a floor jack because the lift arms were getting in the way of everything, but I'm getting it all lined up now. You will be reusing some factory hardware, and I think this is going to sit right about there. I'm going to get these two outer bolts started. It's a little odd because you don't seem to actually remove the skid plate that is part of the gas tank. So you're actually sandwiching the factory skid plate between the frame and the new Metalcloak skid plate. There we go. That looks good. Then we'll throw this one up front here. And in the way back, there's a kicker that comes down off of the frame, and it ties into the back corner of the skid plate back here. The final bolts are some more of these Allen head bolts with the nice washers that allow rocks to slide up over. And these will thread right into all the different parts of the skid plate, so everything will just sandwich together. It's a little bit crowded under here with a floor jack holding this thing up. That looks right. I'm not really sure if this is supposed to hang down below this, but it's... There we go. I wonder if that is supposed to be underneath that. Sure looks like it is. That sure looks like it's supposed to be, yeah, above that. What the hell? I think I need to climb out and look at the instructions again. It seems simple, but it doesn't seem right. The front section goes below the back two sections. I was a little confused on that. I was kind of searching the internet and looking at different instructions, but this makes the most sense. So if you hit a rock here and it starts to slide underneath this thing, the washers around the attachment bolts are tapered so it can slide over that. There's not a lip that's going to catch stuff. It can just keep sliding and you can keep going. The gas tank skid plate also tucks up above the front skid plate. It bolts onto the driver's or the passenger side with 4 factory bolts. In the very back, there's actually an arm that kicks down that you mount to help support the back of it. And the same up here on either side of the engine skid plate. There are arms that go up and attach to the motor mounts. I think it's pretty beefy. Plus there's a nice big hole here if you want to drain the oil, and the transmission and the oil is, the oil pan is probably at least an inch or more above the skid plate. So it kills a little ground clearance, but that gives it some room if you hit this thing really hard and things bend or flex, which it shouldn't, it won't hit the oil pan right away. Everything's pretty beefy and solid. I think we can mark skid plates off the list. That's it for this Dare Daily. We'll see you next time.